to the Flex Rental Solutions online demo. We're going to take the next hour to demonstrate the Flex Rental Solutions rental software. A little background on this software. A lot of us from the company started out in the production industry ourselves. We've worked on many different rental inventory software platforms in the past and have suffered with some of the restrictions and clunkiness with older programs and wanted to create something that was much easier to access anywhere in the world. What we created is Flex Rental Solutions, Flex 4. This is one of the most rapidly growing rental software platforms in the market. It has been 2 years since we released it to the public. Since then, we have over 200 customers throughout all the world using this, from every large corporate event to televised TV event, rock and roll tours, everything in between. We want to make this accessible to everyone, so it is web-based. That means that you can access it anywhere in the world with an internet connection and a web browser. It runs natively on both Mac and Windows. The way we have designed the layout is on the left-hand side, we call this our resource bar. The middle area is what we call our workbench. And on the right side is what we call our workbench menu. On the resource browser area, we can look at all of our different resources. We can click on this bar up here and view all of our different clients or contacts. Under inventory, we can create all sorts of folders and subfolders and put all of our inventory into this area. The recent items area is where a list of the past 24 different recent items that you have worked on will be placed. These will be unique to each user who is logged in, and these can be different quotes, inventory items, contacts, etc. The services area are all of the non-inventory related resources that you might be adding to a quote, such as labor or travel expenses, etc. We also have a search functionality built here. This allows us to never have to close anything down just to go and search for something new. If we click on this top search bar, we can search for contacts or inventory. Those are your two most requested contact searches, but we could also do a search for quotes. I could look for a quote called sales meeting and find all of our different sales meetings that we've done, etc. Or I could do a search for inventory and say I need to look for anything that says Yamaha in it. As an example here, if a very common question asked by people is, what happens if someone calls me up and I need to find out if something's available? So I typed in Yamaha. I could do a quick right click on my Yamaha M7 to see if it's available. I can hit schedule. This will show us the availability of this item on a calendar, giving us how many we have available. Right now it's saying we've got 6 out of 5 available. The reason for that must be that we have a sub-rented console that has not been returned. So actually we have more available to rent out than we own. If the next question, if they're asking if we have any of these available for the upcoming weekend on the 27th, 28th, 29th, we can see that yes, we do have them available. Their question might be, how much are they? We could hit pricing information and go and view our price for this item. So very quickly, without even having to open up a quote, we can check availability and pricing on a very specific item and get the information off to the client without even having to open up a quote. So we can see that we rent this out for $400 a day. On our inventory, we can create all sorts of different folders here. We can organize the folder however we want through drag and drop. Say if we want to organize our audio higher up in the hierarchy than our video, we can just click, drag, and drop. It'll ask, are you trying to put audio inside video or are you trying to put it before video? We're going to hit move before, and then maybe we'll select lighting and drop it on top of video also. So we can organize our inventory however we want. The subfolders, again, can be organized however you want. A lot of people try to think to things as far as systems. What do I want to show up first on a quote? Do I want my speakers to show up? Then let's move our ClearComm down after our playback items maybe, and we'll move it before there. Inside there, we can also do that exact same organization. If we wanted, for instance, for our profile to go on the very top of the list, we can click, drag, and drop and reorganize there also. The way this ordinal system works is the way items are placed in here are the way they are organized when you place them in a quote when you are in what are called auto sort mode. As rules of thumb, what I recommend is that any item that you're accessing on a day-to-day basis, like mixers, I would not go more than 3 folders deep. So right now it would be under audio, mixers, digital, and we could find all of our digital consoles. If you're opening up 4 or 5 folders, your account managers tend to complain because they've got to do too much clicking and opening just to get to what they find. As another rule of thumb, if you've got 50 to 100 line items inside one folder, that might be a good candidate for creating a subfolder to get that list down a little bit more manageable so that they don't have to open and drag and search to find that item. Those are just some simple rules of thumb. We can create different inventory structures for each model. As an example, if we open up our Yamaha PM5D, I'm going to just double click that. It'll open up here in the Workbench. This item has a tab called serial numbers, and the reason for that is if we hit edit inventory item, we have the tracked by serial number is yes, so that creates that tab. We've got a second tab or field here called model container is yes. And what that will do is the model container gives you a contents tab for the model. So on here, you can drag any item that needs to go out with this item every time. It's an accessory that needs to go with it. So whether that is a power supply rack that needs to go with it or a specific power cable, those could be items that you just simply drag and drop over into the contents. So that's a serialized item. Another standard inventory type would be what I call a non-serialized item. Under our speaker cables, we have an NL8 speak-on cable. You'll notice that there's no serial number tab. So if we hit edit inventory item, this is what we call just a non-serialized model where tracked by serial number is no. What that gives us is just a generic quantity for these items. Right now we've got 24 out of 34 at this warehouse. The first number is your dynamic number. That number will change and fluctuate as items go in and out of the warehouse. The 34 is how many we own total that should be at the warehouse if all of them were back. We're also notifying you that out of all these, 10 of them are inside containers. So 24 are on the shelf, we own 34, and the reason why it's down to 24 on the shelf is because 10 are inside other additional cases. So you won't find them on the shelf, but we do own them. We can create other types of items, different ways to package items together. One of them is what we call a virtual package. I'm going to do a search for an item called a kit. And we've got this Source 426 degree kit. So as an example here, under Edit Inventory Item, this preset was set to Virtual Package. So tracked by serial number is no, Model Container is yes, and Virtual Item is yes. So the way that ends up working is this is a virtual item. It also has contents. And the availability of this is calculated through the availability of the contents. If I remove both of these contents, the quantity would be 0. If we open up these bases, the quantity of these bases is quite large. We've got 124 different bases available to go out to rent at this point in time. But the virtual item is saying that we can only make up 35 of these. And the reason for that is because the contents of the lenses are less than the contents of the bases. So it takes the lowest quantity available of the contents. So the lenses are 35 out of 36. So that is our limiting factor in availability for this whole package. We also have a price here for this package that it goes out at $12.50. So the way this ends up looking for the customer is there will be a line item called Source 4 26-degree kit with the price at $12.50. As child elements to that line item, there will be these two line items, and those will be what called line muted, or so that the end client will not see these two lines, but the warehouse and the account manager will. And we'll show you how that works in the future. Another type of an item that we can make is what we call a serialized package. As an example, I'm going to open up under amplifiers our JBL line array amp rack. In here, if we hit edit inventory item, this is tracked by serial number as yes, meaning that each individual amp rack will have its own barcode. We'll have model contents, meaning there might be things that need to go out with this item every time it goes out. Unit contents means that we'll be able to place specific items inside these serialized units that belong to this model. As an example, very specific amplifiers inside a very specific amp rack. We have a setting called contents available is no, and the way that relates to this is every one of those amps that we place inside this unit is not going to be available. Those are going to be part of the package. So if we look at the availability for the amplifiers, they will be reduced for every single amp that is inside this package. The Contents Permanent button defaults those amps as they get placed in to be permanently inside that amp rack. So the functionality is when we scan that amplifier back in, it will leave those amplifiers inside the rack because they are part of the package. As an example, something where contents permanent is no might be something like a moving light inside a shipping case, meaning two went out in one case, they may come back in another. When we scan that case, we want to remove them from the case automatically because we don't believe we don't want to assume that the same light is going to come back in the same case. Free pick container yes is a flag that when you scan one of these items that you want to add additional items inside of it during the scan process. And we'll show you how that works in the future also. So let's go back and see how this translates. Tracked by serial number is yes, meaning these are the different amplifiers. So that's serial number equals yes. Contents is we dragged in a very specific power cable. So we're going to be notifying the warehouse that every time one of these amplifier racks goes out, it needs to include a power cable go with it. So that's model contents is yes. When I go to the serial number and open up a very specific amplifier rack, inside the contents, these are the 4 very specific amplifiers that are inside this case, and those are permanent. So their checkboxes gets checked automatically when we place them inside here. So on the pull sheet, when it says you need to grab an amp rack and we scan barcode 03161, it'll put the amp rack on the pull sheet and mark 1 amp rack is prepped. It will also place these 4 very specific amplifiers inside that rack. And it'll also be in what we call free pick mode, where if we want to, we could then scan in, open up the back of the rack, see if it's got that power cable that needs to go with it, and scan that power cable inside that amplifier rack through the free pick process. So those are settings for something that is a package. The final type of a package that we can create is what we call a storage container. So a storage container is something that exists in the industry where we place stuff inside of it for shipping and protective purposes, but in all reality, we don't want to remove it from available just because we put it inside the case. So we're going to go to the Edit Inventory item. The preset is what we call a Serialized Storage. It's tracked by serial numbers, yes. We can put very specific units inside each case, but the contents are available and they are not permanent. So for this example, if we go to the serial numbers and we open up this very specific barcode, inside here we can place very specific varilites in here, and we've told the system through the system requirements that for this item to be complete, it needs 2 DMX cables and 2 varilites. Right now we've prepped 2 of the DMX cables, but the 2 varilites have not been prepped inside of here. We can either scan the varilites in here right now, or I can just double click and execute what we call a virtual scan, and these 2 are the only 2 left that haven't been filled. So we've placed that one inside here, and now this case is almost complete. And we'll put the last barcode inside there. So now this case is complete and ready to go out. These are the 2 very specific varilites, and it's got 2 non-serialized DMX cables. So what happens is on the pull sheet or on the quote, the account manager is going to say, I need 10 varilites. And because the setting for this case is contents available is yes, even though these are inside of a case, they are still available. We are scheduling what is inside the case. We are not scheduling the case. So when it says I need 10 varilites, the warehouse people, when it gets to the pull sheet, will go and scan this case, barcode 07544, and it will prep 2 of these varilites and 2 DMX cables. Those will be inside the case, and it will mark 2 out of the 10 varilites as prepped. So we can prep these items ahead of time, but leave them available. So that is what we call a serialized storage. So other settings that we have for inventory items, let's open up, say, our Yamaha LS9. Under suggested items, we can put very specific items in here to suggest. So as an example, if we wanted to go to, let's see if we can find a snake that we want to suggest to go with this item. Nope, no, it doesn't look like we have one. Let's say it needs to go out with an AC cable. And it needs to go out with a 100-foot AC cable. We can do that through suggested items also, asking it, do you want an AC cable? We can have alternatives. Alternatives are 2-way relationships. So if we have a conflict and we don't have enough LS9 32-channel consoles, we've dragged and dropped an Avid profile in here as you can use this as an alternative. This alternative is a 2-way relationship, meaning that if the Avid isn't available, it will also suggest to replace it with the LS9. And if I remove this Avid from the LS9, it'll remove the LS9 from the Avid. Under substitutions, what this is for is where we can upgrade to a specific item to resolve a conflict. So if the LS9 32-channel console isn't available, it would suggest the M7 to replace it. So this would have 2 replacements, either the profile or the M7. Now, if the M7 isn't available, it will not suggest the LS9 due to its substitution logic. It will not go down. You can use that same logic with motors. Say I could substitute a 1-ton for a 1/2-ton, but I wouldn't want to go the opposite direction. Or with projectors, I can upgrade from a 2K to a 5K, but I don't want to go back down. Supplier settings are where do we receive, who can we get this item from if we don't have any available. And we have a purchase supplier preference where we can add many vendors and the estimated cost and lead time for purchasing that item. Or we can have a sub-rental supplier preference here. Who do we re-rent it from, and what is the cost to re-rent it from them? So again, you can have multiple suppliers for each item. We've already looked at the schedule here, but we can get to the schedule from many different places. The schedule again shows us our availability for that item on a specific time frame. So we've got 3 of 3 available. Other ways that we can look at availability is we can look at it at more of a global view. If I had a very long weekend with lots of stuff going on that I've got to look globally on how I'm going to resolve conflicts, I might open up a folder and right-click on the folder and go to Inventory Group Availability. So this will show us how many of these we have available per day per item. What you'll notice here on this Avid profile is we do not have any available today, but we've got 1 out of 5 left the rest of the week. It'll give us our lowest quantity available during that time period. So if you're looking for a very specific time slice, you need to know what is the lowest quantity available to rent out during that time period. So between the 21st and the 30th, you don't have any available. If you reduce this search to say how many are available from the 26th and hit search, now we've got 1 available during that time period. You'll notice here that we have not closed any of our tabs. The reason for that is this allows us to do quite a bit of multitasking. If you're bouncing back and forth between your M7s and your PM5Ds, this allows you to really bounce back and forth and be a much more efficient multitasker in the system. You can close down a specific tab. You can also right-click and hit Close All Tabs, and that'll take you back to your default calendar. So that gets us through our inventory phase of things. When you log in, the central Workbench area has your calendar. This is a very configurable page. You can configure this if you have system admin rights to display lots of different information. You could add the company name of who the job is for. You could add the venue. You could add the account manager. All that is very configurable. You can configure what elements you want to see, what statuses of those elements. So if you don't want to see jobs that are canceled, it is simply by opening up this calendar filter box. We can open up our quotes, and if I don't want to see tentative jobs on this, it will now go through and filter out all of our tentative jobs on specific items. So this allows us to go through and really change what we want to see in the system overall. That is for the default calendar, and you need system admin rights to configure this. Every specific user can also have their own My Calendar screen where they can see just their jobs that they're in charge of. Well, let's get together and work on a quote and see how all these different inventory items work inside the system. The easiest way to do that is on the right-hand side, go to New, Quote. This will bring up a dialog where we can put in the name. The ship date and return date are basically when availability is going to be calculated to go out of our system. When it is expected to return. Some people change these names to say gear out, gear in, or prep and return. So if they want to reserve the gear and check availability when they expect to start prepping this item, they may change this to prep and return as an example. Departments can be used to do classifications for reporting purposes. So if we want to create different classifications, that's all customizable. I could say this is an audio quote or just a street rental as opposed to a live event. We can override default times. As an example here under clients, we can also start to type in the contact names. It will show us all of the different contacts that fit that result. If we can't find the contact here, we can click in the binoculars icon, do a more robust search here, or hit add a new contact. This would allow us to add the contact to the system and as the client for the contact for the quote, instead of having to close this down, go back to our contacts, create a new contact, close the contact, go back to the quote, start a new quote, and assign it. This just makes it very quickly to do that. We can also search for a specific company like Dallin Sound, and it will show us both the company record and the contacts that belong to that company. I'm going to hit Eric and get to work and hit accept. The way we have the financial document called quote organized is we have an area up here where we call this the header. This has all of our contact information, all of our logistical information that we've configured for this screen, the warehouse, the ship, the return date, etc. We can expand and collapse this top area through this minus and plus button. So I'm going to shrink it down, open it back up. That's how we shrink the header area. This is what we call the detail block, where we will be adding our inventory and services. Down below is what we have our total and notes area. Again, you can shrink or expand it. The notes area is where you can place notes. You can also select whether you want to print those notes to the end column or not. And then all your different totals area. On the right hand side, we've got different information over here. Our project tree will display all the different elements associated with this whole project. The modify area is where you can modify, delete selected line items, bulk edit, copy the whole quote, move the whole quote, delete the whole quote. Under the reports tab will be all the different reports that we have configured to print against this. Communication is where you can send a PDF and a form letter to the client. We can do some invoicing and logistical information, refresh the display or the availability. Workflow is all the different workflows that you've configured to do in accordance with this quote. From now, we have the ability to confirm it, set it to inquire, or cancel it. We are starting this quote out in what we call the tentative phase, which will reserve gear. The whole workflow is very customizable and is very fluid and allows each customer to really dial in the workflow that they need for their own company. The Add Child elements allows us to add additional information below it. If we want to add a document that has a PDF attached to it, we can do that through the Add Document process, and we'll show that in a little bit. So the detail block. This is where all the information is added. This combo box right here dictates how items will be organized as we drag and drop them in. If we change this to what's called auto mode, these folders here will give us the structure then of when we drop these items in. If I drag in this full bore lighting console, this belongs to our lighting folder, is the parent folder it belongs to. So it will create a subtotal for us called lighting and put the lighting console in there, and will also pop up our suggestions that we might want to send out with this item. So here it's saying, do we want to send out the playback wing, the programming wing, or the USB to VGA adapters? Our availability is also calculated. Right now we don't have any of these available, so it will create a conflict if we add one. And we can select we're going to take the playback wing, and that's all we're going to take. So this has created our lighting subtotal. It's also given us a 10% discount based on the discount that is configured for Eric Satter, and put that all in this subtotal. Now, if I go up to audio and drag a console in there, what will happen is it will create a secondary subtotal. It will also put it above lighting because on the left-hand side, audio is organized higher in the hierarchy than lighting. So we're going to drag and drop this on. Notice that I left it down here. It'll automatically create the audio subtotal for us. There's that suggested item that we created earlier. And it put audio higher than lighting. If I scroll down and put, say, a microphone, it will be put inside the audio category, but lower than the audio console. So that's what's called auto sort. Once it's in here, we can also drag and drop and move things around. I can drag it lower in the same subtotal. I could move it to a new subtotal if I needed to. I can also take it out of a whole subtotal itself. I can select this item, or I could select all line items by hitting the All button. Scroll up to the top, and I'm going to hit Delete Selected Line Items. The second mode that we have is what we call Insert Mode. The use case scenario that a lot of customers use, well, they might use a feature here called Create Subtotal. I'm going to click on that, and we're going to title this Room 250 and hit Accept. With Insert Mode, I can now go and grab an item and drop it anywhere I want. We're just going to insert it. I could hit Create Subtotal. And drag and drop that same item in there. So that's insert mode, and we can bounce back and forth between insert and auto mode and do things however we want. The final mode that we have is what we call add mode. What this will allow us to do is no matter where I try to drop it, it's automatically going to go on the last line item. So it's more like a point of sale system. We can also click on these two items that we added, hit Create Subtotal, and all the checked line items will be placed inside that newly created subtotal. So that's auto, insert, and add. As far as services are concerned, one of the new features that we have is the ability to create call times and tiered pricing models. So as an example, if I switch back to auto sort and grab something out of my labor folder in services, it will create a labor subtotal for us. Now when I drag and drop this item in here, we have this new call time widget. I'm going to expand this so we can see it a little bit better. I can give it a very specific call time. It's from 8 to 5 o'clock. Right now, we're charging a day rate, but if we wanted to, we could override that. And I'm going to go to our standard labor, which will create very specific tiers. So here, it's splitting this up into an hourly rate based off of normal 8 hours and overtime based on this. So what this will allow us to do is we can have multiple rules in our system. And we can base different rules off of different customizations. So as an example, we could have a pricing rule based on our internal labor, which say doesn't go into overtime till 10 hours. We could have a secondary price rule that is based off of an 8-hour overtime rule and a 4-hour minimum. So you could have different rules applied to different labor roles inside the system. One of the features that we're going to allow in future updates is the ability to schedule this contact right here inside the system. We do that through Crewless, and we'll show you that in a moment. But that is one of the features that we're going to work on very shortly. Now, the way we might print this out to the end client depends a lot on these checkboxes here. Note mute allows us to write a note in here, but still not display it to the end client. So if we wrote a note like, don't use the broken one, if we printed out our paperwork, right now you'll see that note. If we note muted it and printed out the paperwork again, you will not see that note. It will save that setting, so the next time you open up this quote, it will still retain that checkbox for the note mute. You can also configure your system to say, I always want to default my my note mutes to be enabled by default. PM stands for price mute. What price mute does is it will show the line item, but will not include the pricing information. So we could price mute a single item. We could also price mute a whole subtotal. Or we could hit the PM button and price mute everything. So this allows us to send out a quote to our end customer without giving them line item detail, but just subtotal, discounts, etc. and our total. So that is price mute. Again, it will save all that information for you. LM stands for line mute. If we don't want to show a specific item to the end client, we can line mute that specific item. So say we don't want to show them the call time. We can line mute the call time. That may be just for internal purposes. So when we print this, now we will not have call time details listed in here. So note mute, price mute, line mute. TM stands for total mute. Sometimes we want to display a price, but not calculate it towards the total. Examples of that are maybe people want to show them that they're getting, this is what it would normally cost, but I'm just going to throw it in for free. So right now our total is at 515. If I total mute that, it will reduce the total amount accordingly. I've seen people create a subtotal here and call it optional items and put all the optional things that the customer did not ask for and total mute them so that all those items are, hey, anything inside this box is not in the total, but you may want to add, and if you add them, here's what it would be. I've seen people use that same thing with expendables. We're going to send out some extra gel sheets and lamps. We're not going to charge you for them unless you use them, and here's the cost if you use them. So note mute, price mute, line mute, total mute, all sorts of things that basically adjust how the end client will see the printout when you send it to them. Bulk edit would allow us to change multiple items at the same time. I could select this subtotal, this subtotal, this subtotal, and hit bulk edit. And we could change the time instead of from a 1 day to a 1.5 day rate. So that'll recalculate that time value for all the selected items. Apply trading terms is if we need to reset whatever their standard terms are. If we've overridden them here, maybe we took off the standard discount in the header area and we want to reapply it, that would reapply it. Copying allows us to take an exact quote and copy it to sometime in the future maybe and give it a new name. Move would allow us to move it to a new project. What I mean by projects is we've got one folder, one element that we call event folders. So as an example, in here we've got a country music festival folder, and in there through the add child elements we added multiple quotes, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. And if I'm not mistaken, we have canceled stage 2. When we generate our PDF, this will do a couple things. This will create a cover page for us with all the jobs that aren't confirmed listed individually. So there is stage 1, stage 2, grand total, and a place for them to sign. Then we told the system to print out all the different line items for each quote and then put in our terms and conditions. So that's an event folder, and that's how the project tree starts to reflect everything that's associated with the whole job. So back to this test mixer rental, things that we could do is we could create a new event folder and we'll call it IBM Sales Meeting. As an example. And then we could move this job. Maybe this was all of our breakout rooms. So I'm going to change this to, I'm going to hit edit header and we'll call this IBM breakout rooms. And then we're going to hit the move and we're going to move it to IBM, oops, sorry. So we can move it to that folder. And it looks like there's already some other stuff inside of it. So we can create this different folder structure to organize our events. Send to client would allow us to email this PDF to our end client. It will have his email inside there automatically. I'm going to just send it to myself. I don't want to send it to Eric. So this will use this form letter that we've configured in the system and attach it as a PDF. And so now we've sent that off. What that will do is under our event history tab up here, this will keep a record of when we send off the PDF, who sent it, and who we sent it to. This is helpful if an account manager is out and a customer calls wanting to find out why they haven't received this PDF. You can then look in the event history. Well, it looks like Christine sent it to you on September 12th at 9:27 a.m. Let's check your spam folder. You're an important customer. We want to make sure it doesn't fall through the cracks. So it just gives you event history on what's happened to this job. If they call back and said, yes, we want to confirm this job with you, we can execute this workflow right here by clicking confirm quote. We can have very specific email workflows happen where if we want to send this out to a specific customer or a specific user in the system, it could automatically be filled in here, or we could remove it. And let's say I want to notify Devin that I'm confirming this job. and here's all the information, and he'll have a link to get right to this job. And I'm going to hit add. So now Devin will be notified that I confirmed this job. With that workflow triggered, there are new workflow settings in here that are further down the line after we confirm things. We can generate the pull sheet, reset it to tentative, flag it as ready to invoice, or set it to inquiry. A little note about statuses. Statuses are very customizable in the system. If you go under System Settings, Status Options, you'll notice that we have lots of statuses, and you can create all your own, call them what you want. As an example, we have one called Inquiry, which doesn't create conflicts. And we've got another called Tentative, which does create conflicts. And you can configure your own system accordingly to say, I want to start out everything in a tentative mode. Most customers who use that their customers are reoccurring customers that are basically informing you of the next job you're doing, and they want to reserve the gear as they're making the quote instead of having to have a second option to set it to tentative or confirmed. Other customers of ours who have lots of jobs going on all at the same time, that might be a really good example of, or they have lots of customers calling them up just getting pricing. That may be a customer that is a candidate to start everything in inquiry mode. But it's all very customizable. So with this generate pull sheet, if we click that, this will generate an equipment list that is ready to be pulled by the warehouse. So the warehouse still has this note to not use the broken one. And here's all the gear that needs to go out. So that's workflow. That is all very customizable. Now, we still have this exact same workflow because we really haven't done anything else except for generated the pull sheet. Other things that we can do here, let's add a child element called add document. And we're going to call this one room layout and hit accept. I'm going to browse my hard drive and go to my documents. And I've got this room layout here of how everything's going to be laid out for these three breakouts. And I'll put some notes. It just hasn't been approved. So now, as an example, there's our event folder. There's the quote for the general session. Here's the quote that we've been working on, the breakout rooms. There's the pull sheet for the breakout rooms. There's the documents for the breakout rooms. So it really makes it very efficient to work on large projects. I don't have to close down this quote, go back to my search page, search for my general session, open up my general session, things like that. No matter where you are at, the project tree always relates to everything associated with this job. It really makes it quite elegant. If we finally got a version that was approved, I could browse my hard drive, go and get the new revision, and say approved 09/21. So now we've got multiple revisions. And so this makes it very nice to get all your information associated with the job attached to it. So if your lighting people are going to be pulling jobs and they don't know what the light plot looks like and they want to view it, hopefully they're not calling you up and saying, hey, where's the light plot? The goal is for everything to be associated with itself up on the job. So you don't have to say, oh, it's on my laptop. I'll get it to you back when I'm done with the show, when I'm back at the hotel room. It's there ready to go. It really makes it quite nice to have a central sandbox where all the pertinent information can be associated with each other. Well, let's click back and go back to our quotes. So that's adding a child element. The other things that we have on here are the ability to have multiple tabs here. Again, these are all configurable. The logistics view would be logistical information relating to this job. Who are we subrenting these items from? How many are we subrenting? Who are we transferring from if we've got multiple locations? We'll go over that in a second. The profit view would allow us to create a cost for each item, compare that to the end price, look at our total profit margin, and view our total cost, total price, how much we're making off this, etc. The change view is a auditing area. This will show us who created each line item, date and time it was created, who modified it, and the date and time that they modified it. We had one customer who had an account manager who had added an item to a quote after the job had been shipped, and then went down and yelled at the warehouse manager saying, "How could you not send this item?" He didn't want to look bad. Well, ended up looking really bad because the warehouse manager went and looked at the change log after he put out the fire and noticed that it had been added, 15 minutes before, and notified the account manager, "Hey, don't let this happen again." So this just creates an area where we can remove a lot of the gray areas in the system and put much more accounting, auditing functions in place. That is also one of the reasons why we don't do any user license restrictions at present time. We want everyone to have their own unique login so that we know who's doing what and where and when. Replacement value. This is a screen that we put together for customers if they want to have a replacement value to send out to their end clients. These are all very customizable fields that we can put together and views. We also over here have a notes area, which would allow you to take notes. So still not confirmed. We'll check back. We can save these notes as part of the whole job. If we go under Contacts, Contact Manager, and if I look for Eric and double click him, he will have a job notes area, and this will have all the job notes that relate back to him. So these are two notes that we've put, the jobs that they relate to, when they were placed, who entered them, and we can always, this just allows us to view all the notes for a specific contact. So that gets us through a lot of the different quote modifications and how we can organize and view these quotes. If you've got any specific questions, there are a couple ways that you can receive help. Under Help, there's the email customer support. This will send off an email to to our support team. And you can send off your questions there. We also have, under the Help, a user form area. You can create an account and ask questions or view other people's questions. It's quite active. And then finally, under Help, we also have our YouTube channel where you can go and view specific videos on different topics. We will have this video placed on there as an example. So you can go to our channel and view all the different quotes. We go over a lot more in detail on the specific serialized packages, virtual packages, things like that, QuickBooks integration. And so if you've got any questions, please contact support@flexrentalsolutions.com. We thank you for your time and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.